Okay, so what does it actually take to lead a team through something that seems completely impossible? Well, we're about to find out, because this is hands down one of the most incredible survival stories ever recorded.
So here's the big question. How did 28 men get stranded in Antarctica for nearly 2 years, and every single one of them survived? It's just wild. This whole thing starts as a monumental failure, right? An expedition that goes completely off the rails. But somehow it turns into this legendary story of leadership and just the raw will to live.
All right, let's set the stage. We're going back to 1914. The ambition? Well, it was huge, maybe even a little crazy. The plan, led by Sir Ernest Shackleton, was to be the very first to cross the entire Antarctic continent on foot.
It's the gap between the plan and the reality that's just staggering here. The plan was all about glory, a 120-day trek across a whole continent. The reality, a 634-day ordeal just trying not to die. They packed for a historic march, but what they got was an unimaginable fight for their lives.
So Shackleton was, let's just say, determined. People, actual whalers who knew the area, warned him in South Georgia. They said, hey, these are the worst ice conditions we've seen in years. But did he listen? Nope. He ordered his ship, the Endurance, to push right on into the Weddell Sea. And well, let's just say the Antarctic had other ideas.
And that one decision, that single choice to ignore the warnings and push on, that's what led directly to the first major disaster of the entire expedition. So, in January of 1915, the Endurance gets trapped, just frozen solid in a sea of ice. And it's not like it's a quick thing. For 9 long months, they're just stuck there. Imagine listening to the ship's wood groaning and cracking under all that pressure. Then, in October, the hull just splinters. Shackleton has to give the order, abandon ship. A month later, they're all just standing on the ice, watching their last connection to the world sink. The mission to cross Antarctica, over. The new mission, just stay alive.
I mean, can you even imagine the feeling? One of the crewmen, Tom McLeod, said, I don't think we'll ever be able to return home. And you can just feel that sense of complete hopelessness, right? Standing on this floating chunk of ice, watching your ship, your home, your hope get crushed and disappear forever.
So now they're basically castaways on a giant drifting piece of ice. And this is where the real test of survival truly begins.
Think about how isolated they were. No radio, no way to contact anyone. Zero chance a random ship is going to pass by. They were drifting hundreds of kilometers from land. Everything had to be about survival. Shackleton made every man limit their personal items to just 2 pounds. He even set the example himself, tossing his gold watch but keeping a page from the Bible. Everything was stripped down to the absolute bare essentials.
So what did they have to eat? Well, from the sinking ship, they managed to save about 1 month's worth of food. And that had to be split between all 28 of them. 28 guys, with 1 month of food, floating in the middle of nowhere.
So, they had to get creative. Survival meant hunting. They went after seals and penguins. And eventually, they even had to eat their own sled dogs. I mean, every single day was just a brutal battle against starvation and the incredible psychological pressure of being so completely alone.
497 days. Let that sink in. For 497 days, not one of these men stood on solid ground. They lived entirely on this unstable, drifting sheet of ice. That's well over a year without feeling actual earth under your feet. Just unbelievable.
Okay, so just when you think it can't get worse, their ice floe, their home for all that time, it finally breaks apart. They had to scramble into 3 tiny lifeboats. And after landing on the completely desolate Elephant Island, you might think, okay, a small victory, but their journey was far, far from over. Because to get home, they had to cross something called the Drake Passage. And this isn't just any stretch of water. It's known as the most dangerous sea in the entire world. We're talking waves that can get up to 12 meters high. It's basically a ship graveyard. And they had to try and cross it in a lifeboat.
So Shackleton comes up with this plan, and it's a Hail Mary, a total long shot. He's going to leave 22 men behind on Elephant Island. He and 5 others will take 1 small boat and try to sail 1,300 kilometers across that ocean to a whaling station on South Georgia Island. If they make it, they can mount a rescue. It was a desperate, almost suicidal gamble, but really, it was the only shot they had.
And here's the crazy part. After 16 grueling days, getting battered by storms, they actually did it. They miraculously landed on South Georgia. But
They landed on the wrong side of the island, and separating them from the whaling station was a 10,000-foot mountain range that was totally unmapped. No human had ever crossed it before.
So what do? Of course they cross it. In one final, just astonishing feat of endurance, Shackleton and 2 of his men trekked across those mountains for 36 hours straight. When they finally stumbled into the whaling station, they were completely unrecognizable. It had been over a year and a half since anyone from the outside world had seen them alive.
But even after all that, Shackleton wasn't done. He was back in civilization, sure, but his mind was on one thing and one thing only: the 22 men he had left behind.
And it was not easy. For 3 months, he tried to get back to them. The first attempt, blocked by ice. The second, blocked by ice. The third, same thing. Every time, the Antarctic winter ice was just this impassable wall. And you can imagine the growing fear that they were just too late.
But on the 4th attempt, using a ship loaned to him by the Chilean government, Shackleton finally broke through. And back on Elephant Island, the 22 men had survived for over 4 months, living under 2 overturned boats. Their leader there, Frank Wild, kept their spirits up by telling them the same thing every single morning: the boss may come today.
Well, on August 30th, 1916, the boss came. After 634 days of just unimaginable hardship, the number of men who died was 0. Not a single one.
So let's think about this. The expedition departed with 28 men, and 28 men returned. Was the mission to cross Antarctica a success? No. It was a complete and utter failure, but when you look at it in terms of the human spirit, it was one of the greatest triumphs imaginable. Every single man came home alive.
Which really makes you wonder, right? Was this failure actually the greatest success in the history of exploration? It's a story that kind of proves that success isn't always about hitting your target. Sometimes it's about how you handle things when that target becomes completely impossible.